Are you an audiophile on a budget but looking for some fantastic audio? Then call this number on your screen right now to get yourself a fantastic deal. Okay, that's just a joke. Don't call that number. I actually have no idea where that leads to. But that number does come from a song lyric, so if you figured it out, shout out to you. If you do, post it down in the comment section below. If you didn't, then you can of course Google it or potentially think about it for a little while. Now, jokes aside, this is a video review of the iFi Neo iDSD. It's a desktop DAC that can be found for around £700/$700, and you were like, wait a second, I thought you said audiophile on a budget. Yes, audiophile goes from £1, $1 all the way up to $10,000, $1 million, like Dr. Evil might say. But genuinely speaking, you've got a massive range. Now, in this review, I'm going to be comparing the iFi Neo iDSD directly to my Chord Hugo 2 DAC, which costs upwards of £1,700, $1,700 if you can find it in the US. So that gives you an idea of where I'm kind of basing my audiophile budget type of thing. If you want alternative DAC suggestions, and yes, that includes at all budgets, including at a very affordable price, i.e., $50 to $100 type of thing, then do check out in the links in this description below, where I've got a variety of different suggestions depending on your price tag and of course as to what you're looking for. Now, before jumping into this review, if you do want to keep up with the channel, definitely do subscribe if you haven't already, and of course hit the bell notification so that you get notified when there's videos that go live on my channel. And furthermore, I'm on social media, pretty much every single platform you can think of, but Instagram and Twitter are the ones that I'm most active on, so do check me out on there, and of course give me a follow. I'd be very much appreciated. And I do also do car reviews, more specifically of hybrid or all-electric vehicles, so if you're interested in that in terms of the news or indeed reviews, where I basically output a new car review pretty much every single week, definitely do check out Totally EV. Your support will be equally appreciated in that respect. Now, to kick things off, let's talk about what you get in the box. And aside from what you can see over here, you also get a relatively short Type A to Type B cable. Now, what I do like about the package content is the fact there's a small little remote that's included. Although it's not exactly the most premium remote in the world, it is very handy in order for you to basically change inputs or mute the DAC. There's also a little stand which allows you to either place the DAC in a kind of vertical or horizontal format depending on your setup. I actually used it more of a vertical setup and therefore used it with the included stand. There's a bunch of RCA cables and a DC power input which you will need, so you do need to power the DAC externally aside from the USB. Now, the little antenna is due to the fact that this supports Bluetooth, and by Bluetooth it actually supports pretty much every single codec you can think of, going all up to LDAC codec, aptX adaptive, even the more, the rarer HWA codec as well. So essentially in every single Bluetooth codec you can think of, it does support, and I tested it with my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus and it picked up the LDAC codec flawlessly. Of course, you have to enable the option through the Bluetooth menu, which I often forget to do with LDAC enabled devices because they're relatively rare, but it's nice to see it enabled on the iFi DAC. Now, moving on from that, we've got the build quality and design, which I feel is absolutely exquisite on this DAC. It just looks and feels premium, to say the least. Of course, you're not going to be really feeling it, so to speak, because it's on your desk, but what you will be using quite often is actually the volume knob, which has got a nice little clicky feel to it, which I really do appreciate. It's not too much resistance either, which makes incremental updates in terms of volume control very, very handy to do. Now, there's a small little OLED display as well, which gives you the key information in terms of the audio sample rate and things that are being played through the DAC, and also in terms of what connection you're using. And you've also got a source button found directly on the DAC itself, which also doubles up as a Bluetooth pairing button. And you've got an on and off button, which is something that I actually complained about on the iFi Zen DAC, where it didn't actually have an on and off button at all. So it's nice to see that is included. Now, in terms of outputs, you've got an unbalanced 6.3mm output, and you've also got a balanced 4.4 pentagon output, which is nice to see, and definitely something at this price point, which is not to say a rarity, but in comparison to some of its competitors, namely my Chord Hugo 2 DAC, which is basically double the price, it doesn't offer a balanced output. So it's nice to see that iFi have actually integrated
integrated and a balanced output, and we'll touch upon the balanced and unbalanced outputs in terms of the audio quality section later down in this review. Now the balanced output don't stop there, because at the rear of the Neo iDSD you've got XLR outputs which are balanced, and you've got unbalanced RCA outputs as well. Now as for inputs, you've got coaxial, you've got optical, and you've got USB. USB was the mode I was using it at, and of course you've got the antenna, which I talked about before in terms of connection, and the DC input as well for power. Now very much on the subject of inputs and outputs, the Neo iDSD also supports 32-bit 768 kHz and DSD up to 512, and furthermore natively supports MQA as well. Ultimately, this DAC is very feature packed, not only in terms of what it supports, but also in terms of what you can connect to it. I mean, if you just think of its Bluetooth codec support, for example, it's pretty mind-blowing to think that this DAC supports every single codec you can think of, specifically when it comes to the audiophile type of grade of codec that you might be looking for. Add in the fact that you have got a very small, slender package, which also does look stylish. I'll be hard pressed to see any other suggestions that you guys might have in the comment section below of some sort of DAC that supports all of these things and also doesn't look like a massive hefty receiver that will take a lot of space up on your desk.
Now before jumping into my sound quality impressions, I do want to have a little disclaimer, and that's truthfully because I'm quite an honest and transparent reviewer, and I'm not sure if iFi will appreciate this or not, but I still want to highlight it. Now in this respect, this is the second iteration of the Neo iDSD that I've received from iFi. The first iteration actually went back to iFi and it got fixed. Now what was the problem? Well, there was some hissing and actually some whining noise that I could actually hear when it came to listening to in-ear monitors. Now why am I highlighting it? Because products which, no matter their cost, have manufacturing defects. Even £90,000 or $100,000 vehicles have manufacturing defects, or even in some cases have multi-billion dollar/pound recalls. And that's very much the case. But the reason I'm highlighting it is because it doesn't seem like I'm the only one. After having sent it back, I looked online and I came across a few Amazon reviews, namely those people in the US, and I saw those people complaining about the hissing sound. They didn't expand as to why it was there or the testing that they'd done, but for me, I tested with both balanced and unbalanced headphones and in-ear monitors, and tested with basically over 10 different devices and used different cables, different setups, different wall plugs, and essentially I determined that the product was faulty, and I decided not to review it and instead get iFi to look into the issue and give me an explanation as to what's happened before actually getting onto this review. Now I've been told by iFi that that was caused by a poor solder that was joint on a capacitor, and that has now been fixed, and indeed I can confirm that has been fixed. Now the reason I'm saying it is because other people might have that issue. If you do have that issue, definitely contact iFi. They seem to be really good in terms of turning around their RMA, or indeed correcting their problem, and I just hope that this is going to be sorted on a more global scale rather than it just being a few different devices, that every device is kind of checked for this problem before it actually goes out to customers, because ultimately if I was buying a £700 DAC and it had that problem, I wouldn't be too pleased either. So I can understand the frustration of those people who actually purchased it on Amazon. Now with that disclaimer out the way, I do also want to talk about the balanced versus unbalanced output. Now of course there's a running debate as to what is better in terms of setup. Should you be investing in balanced headphones or even balanced DAC? Well, in my case, I don't actually have balanced headphones, so I actually asked iFi to send me out some balanced and unbalanced headphones, in other words, ones that can be interchanged. And in this respect, they sent me some Meze earphones, and they also sent me the Audio-Technica ATH MSR7B, which is the one I actually used predominantly for my testing because it was quite easy to interchange the cables. In other words, changing between the balanced output and the unbalanced output. And here, because the Neo iDSD has that option, it meant that it was really easy to chop and change between the two outputs at basically within a couple of seconds, and therefore try the differences between balanced and unbalanced. What I'm going to just ultimately outline here is the fact that the balanced output really does make a difference, and it's really nice to see that iFi have integrated a balanced output. It's no surprise because even their cheaper products do offer a balanced output, but it's nice to see that the Neo iDSD does a fantastic job in this domain and really does enhance the overall audio experience, and something that it did make me think twice as to why does my Chord Hugo 2 DAC not have a balanced output despite it costing a lot more money than the Neo iDSD. So now we get onto my subjective thoughts on the sound quality. Now it's worth bearing in mind here that I'll be comparing the Chord Hugo 2 DAC and the iFi Neo iDSD on their unbalanced outputs, because here both DACs have that output and it made it for a level playing field, and furthermore I was able to utilize my own headphones, which are the MU-Teak. Now in this respect, the sub-bass tones of the iFi are absolutely flawless. I had no issues whatsoever. It really does extend really well, and there's no sort of cut-off on the sub-bass frequencies. Here I felt that the DAC really did pair well with my closed-back woody headphones and gave me that kind of meaty type of sound that I liked. Now the mid-bass was also pretty pronounced, and actually I found that after around 30 to 50 hours of burn-in that the iFi DAC actually reduced its mid-bass impact a little bit and made it more for a balanced sound. However, in comparison to the Chord Hugo 2 DAC, the iFi DAC was slightly uncontrolled in the mid-bass tones. Here it could be heard that the iFi DAC just didn't give that same sort of pinpoint precision that my Chord Hugo 2 DAC was able to do. Now in the grander scheme of things, it still does a phenomenal job, don't get me wrong, and in comparison to cheaper DACs, even from the likes of iFi themselves, it still does a phenomenal job and will still surpass its cheaper competitors. But it's just, again, worth bearing in mind here that I'm doing a like-for-like test, and in this respect, in the mid-bass tones, it was a touch uncontrolled. Now with a little bit of extra heft on the mid-bass tones, here it did come apparent that the lower mids took a little bit of a hit. It was a little bit recessed, and in comparison to the Chord Hugo 2 DAC, I found it to be just a little bit more pushed back. Now don't get me wrong, in comparison to cheaper DACs out there, or ones that cost the same price as the iFi DAC, you're not going to notice a problem, but in comparison to the Chord Hugo 2 DAC, which here I was comparing as an A/B test, you did hear a little bit of a difference. However, on the upper mids, the iFi DAC actually did come out on top, and it was very much impressive in this domain that it actually did better for female vocals. And in comparison to, again, the Chord Hugo 2 DAC, which costs a lot more, here the iFi DAC actually does do a phenomenal job. Now as for the highs, they do extend really well at the top end. I didn't feel them to roll off in any slight shape or form, but it's worth bearing in mind that if you were to use these with more sensitive earphones, specifically earphones I would say, rather than just headphones, then you might notice a little bit of sibilance at the top end, specifically as well if you're going to be using them at louder volumes, which is never recommended. But for those people who are going to be using them at higher volumes, you will find that the highs become a little bit harsher at that top end. Again, comparing it like for like with the Hugo 2, this didn't seem to be a problem with the Chord Hugo 2 DAC, where it seems to be a little bit more inherent of an issue with the iFi DAC. But again, on the whole, the highs were phenomenal, and again, at this price point, I can't think of a better DAC that does a better job in this domain. Now, with that all in mind, we get onto Soundstage, and here is where you can really hear the differences in terms of incremental price increases, of course within reason, or within good quality DACs which are out there, which are, not say affordable, but worth their money. In this respect, if I went for the iFi Z DAC, then moved up to, let's say, the Cambridge Audio DAC Magic Plus, then I moved over to the Chord Mojo DAC, then I moved over to the Neo iDSD, then I moved over to the Hugo 2, you can hear a difference between the Soundstage, the incremental updates, or should I say the incremental ways of getting better in terms of Soundstage width and depth really became apparent here. And here the differences between the Neo iDSD and the Hugo 2 might not seem as clear-cut upon first listen, but after you listen to it for numerous amounts of hours, you will notice that the Hugo 2 DAC does sound a little bit wider and has a little bit better instrument separation over the Neo iDSD. Again, in a grander scheme of things, in comparison to cheaper DACs or ones that cost similar price tag, in other words around £700 and aren't £1,700, £1,800, then the Neo DAC does a phenomenal job, not only competing with these DACs, but bettering them in a multitude of different ways. So again, set your expectations correctly. But if the soundstage is very important to you and you're really looking for the utmost quality, then you're gonna have to spend more money in this domain. And again, to untrained ears, or for those people who have, let's say, not great quality headphones, differences won't be as greater in comparison to those people who have the appropriate equipment that goes with these DACs. So ultimately what I'm trying to say over here is that while the iFi Neo iDSD can't quite keep up with the Chord Hugo 2 DAC, it definitely gives it a run for its money. Considering the Neo iDSD costs around £700, $700, and I've been basically comparing it to a $1,800/$1,800 DAC, it gives you a good indication of how good this thing performs. Add in the fact that you've got fantastic Bluetooth codec support, you've got multitude of different outputs and inputs to choose from, a great quality design, and furthermore something that is really doing a fantastic job where it really counts when it comes to audio quality. It's quite hard not to recommend the Neo iDSD despite it not sounding as good as the Chord Hugo 2 DAC. As a result, this product actually gets my Best Buy award. So despite me having some issues with the product beforehand, I can't knock it for being a fantastic overall performer and something that I would see myself using and definitely recommending to family and friends. Of course, that's my subjective opinion about it. I'd be very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And of course, if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe to see more honest, unbiased, detailed reviews from the channel. And of course, hit that bell notification if you want to get notified. And favorite and share, as it'll always help the channel grow. Alright, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.